This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Stories influence, teach, and inspire us. But what about the storytellers who create them? Uncorking a Story profiles storytellers to uncover how their background and life experiences influence the stories they create. We learn what motivates them, their path to success, and what fuels them to keep creating. It all starts by asking one simple question: where does your story begin? Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Now here's your host, Mike Carlin.
Well, hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm thrilled to introduce you to Melissa Giberson. Melissa is an author and occupational therapist, and as a storyteller, she captures moments by taking pictures and writing. Her essays have appeared online and in print in numerous publications, and she received an honorable mention in the Memoirs personal essays category of the 91st Annual Writer's Digest Writing Competition. Now that is an accomplishment. She joins me today to discuss her memoir, Late Bloomer, Finding My Authentic Self at Midlife. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Melissa.
Thank you, Mike. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here. And Melissa, I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
So my story, I've always enjoyed writing. I remember as a kid being sad about my folks' divorce, and I would start writing. I never gave them the letters or the songs, but I do remember doing it. But I had someone recently asked me, is this your dream? And I told them about having had something published in graduate school, an article for the school I was attending. It was non-traditional. And thrilled, absolutely thrilled when I got that notification that we want to publish your article, and then seeing my name. And I knew then that I wanted to see that again. But life happens. It didn't happen again, although I kept writing. And when I started writing pieces of my current story, I had dug them up in the pandemic, reached out to Brooke Warner of She Writes Press, not really knowing a whole lot about her, and said, so I found this in, the back of my closet. Would anybody be interested in this story? And she said, well, I'd be interested. And my story of this book and my emerging into this, writing world started then. We started working together, and those stories took shape and meaning, and a book came out of it.
So how old were you when your parents divorced?
I was, I believe, 10, 11 when, I was going to say something I probably shouldn't say, when it hit the fan.
That's okay. You can swear if you need to.
Thanks. It comes with being a New Yorker.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm a Connecticut guy, so
Okay.
I'm not as bad with the language as New Yorkers, but there could have been some sailors in my family. So you were 10 or 11, and you're turning to writing to help process through kind of what's going on in your home life, or?
Exactly. There was very little productive communication, let's say, and typical of a kid. I didn't know what was happening, and I was sad about it. And so I took to writing as if I was writing to my parents, even though I never shared it with them, in some childish kind of fantasy that, they would see it and see the error of their ways, and everything would be resolved and peace would come back into my home, which isn't how it happened, but it's where my first memory of actually writing through my feelings started.
Yeah, but that must have been cathartic for you, to some extent, kind of helping that, 10, 11, 12-year-old, young Melissa kind of process through some very complex emotions. I mean, and you're right at the cusp of hitting puberty and all these big life, hormonal changes kind of coming through.
Right.
So yeah, did you keep any of those letters?
Sadly, I didn't, unless I find those in the back of some closet, the way I found, what became a book. That would be great. But all these years later, they have not emerged. So I don't know where they ended up.
All right. So give us the backstory to Late Bloomer. It sounds like you had been maybe not intending to write a book, but what were the building blocks of it? Was it like journaling, or what was it?
I'm not a real, if I can use that word, journaler, but I do write to process and to kind of make sense of what's going on, I say, around me and within me. So I will do that pen to paper. I love journals, the books, but I end up taking notes in them, and I will write into my computer. I will write essays, articles, stories, things just to make sense. And I had done that early in my journey in my mid-40s when I had come across some information that made me start to question the path that I was on. And those stories are what I had uncovered during the pandemic that had caused me to reach out to Brooke Warner.
Got it. So there was some kind of, I don't want to say a flashpoint event that happened, but there was something that happened.
Mm-hmm.
You turned to writing to help process it. So the big question that I'm guessing my listeners are going to be asking is, well, what was that flashpoint event that happened? Like what pushed you on the path of turning to writing again to process something, complex, or a big curveball thrown at you?
Right. So what happened was, I had been married to a man, my ex-husband. We were married 19 years, 2 kids, living in suburban New Jersey. And I never imagined a life other than that. And suddenly one day a woman walked into my office, and she looked at me in a way that no one ever did before. And I think I looked at her in a way I had never looked at anyone before. And a friendship developed, and that friendship became a little bit more than that. And I did not give it any thought at all, to be honest with you, other than having this friendship and these feelings I didn't understand. I don't know that I wanted to. And then one day I was at the gym in the locker room, and there was a woman with her back to me, and she was putting lotion on her legs. And suddenly, like, I was just frozen in time. And that was the first time the words crossed my mind. Am I gay? Like, why am I looking at this woman? That's
Right.
Zoe. And that's when I started realizing something was going on with me that I needed to understand.
Right.
And I started writing again.
So growing up, you never had any inclination that you were anything but a heterosexual female.
Yeah, that's correct.
So this is coming, what you mentioned, in your 40s?
I was 44.
44 years old. Okay. So 44, you've lived, sort of I don't want to say textbook life, but textbook sort of stereotypical, heterosexual life, married to a guy, a couple kids at home, suburban New Jersey, which sounds exciting. And then all of a sudden, you develop this friendship, and, you see somebody at the gym, and the wheels start turning.
Yes.
I have to. So, and then you turn to writing. At what point in time do you approach your husband with this information?
So once those, as you say, those wheels started turning, and I started reaching out for help to try to understand what was happening, because I didn't know. It didn't make sense to me, and I was probably fighting it. I probably, some level of me understood, but because this was the life that I had been working on creating and envisioning, my children, I was fighting it. So I reached out for help, and my husband at the time knew something was happening. And at one point he sent me an email and said, "Can we talk? Can you please tell me what it is you've not been telling me?" And so I reached out to my support people that had sort of responded to my calls for help. And they said, "Tell him, he already knows." So we sat down, and I told him I was struggling with my sexuality. And he said, "I know."
Wow.
And we cried together, and he was extremely supportive at that early stage. And we decided to keep things as quote unquote normal because we were just months away from my daughter's bat mitzvah.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to do anything to interfere with her moment that she'd been working on. And so we just went about our way for, the next several months until after on the other side of the bat mitzvah. And then we told them a month later that there were changes.
Interesting. How do you imagine that your husband knew?
Well, he had some suspicions because of this friendship I had, and he saw that I was out of sorts, behaving a little bit out of character. I was spending time with this woman beforehand. At that point, I wasn't anymore, but, he had seen the progression and he saw that I was struggling with something. And, he wasn't going to outright say it. He gave me the grace and the space for me to come to it on my own. And I am appreciative of how supportive he was at that early stage.
Yeah, I could see where it'd be very hard for some people, men or women, to be supportive when their spouse comes to them and says, "Hey, this person you married,
right,
is not the same person that you married." So it seems like that was a positive outcome in that regard. I mean, having that conversation and being able to cry about it and almost mourn over the end of what was, seems like it's like, I mean, I got a tear in my eye when you were telling me that story. Like it's actually a beautiful story. How did your kids take it?
So my kids, when I told them, a month later, I told them on Black Friday, so the day after Thanksgiving, and my kids are great. My daughter is what I call an old soul. She's very empathetic. She suspected something was going on. She had no way of knowing what. And when I told them everything at the same time, I told them that, he and I would be separating. We had an in-home separation, so they would see some changes and then more changes would come later. And I told them the reason why we were separating, because I didn't want them to have the same experience I had as a kid. I never wanted them to think that there was, we would be getting back together or that it was their fault in any way. And I never wanted them to get a sense of shame because I have no shame. And I didn't want them to get any kind of inkling that the reason I didn't tell them early on was that. And what happened was when my daughter was sitting to my left on a different chair, and I was obviously very emotional telling them this was the hardest thing I think I had ever done in my life, was to tell my children, because I was afraid of hurting them, changing their story and how they would react. And when I finally got the words out, my daughter got up from that chair, sat down next to me, shoulder to shoulder, put her hand on my back, and just started rubbing my back, just giving me that love and support that she sensed I needed at that time.
Yeah.
And she's been great. And my son was a little bit younger, never ever had a problem with the sexuality piece. But he, was initially upset knowing that his dad at one point was going to leave the house. So, but we maintain a really great relationship. I have a great relationship with my kids. My kids have a wonderful relationship with each other, and they have a great relationship with their dad.
Yeah, because, you had a choice. I mean, a fork in the road, right? One way you could go down and just kind of hide it and keep living inauthentically. And, you made the very hard, which would have been hard for you. You made the hard choice to sort of reveal everything that was going on, which, of course, short term would create a little turmoil in the family, but long term, it's probably a lot better doing that and having that sort of really hard conversation, than kind of hiding who you truly are. And then having your behavior, I'm sure they would know something was up, and I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. It's more like, you had two paths you could go by, to quote Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And you chose the one that was very hard for you personally at the time, but sort of probably the most positive decision you could have made at that point in time as well.
Yes. I understand everything that you're saying, and I agree 100%. And some of the things that I was told are kids are resilient. This is a great lesson for them. I had read a book by now adult children who had a parent that had, they had divorced because somebody had come out as gay. And all of those adult children at the time said, because their stories were different, they had wished that their parents didn't stay together for them, because they looked back on their childhood as, being inauthentic, if I could use that word, that they would have rathered it go a different way. And the other thing I always think of is if one of my children, I have two children, had come to me, what would I have said to them? Or if they still do, what would I say to them if they came to me with, such a huge problem? I'd say, be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Live your genuine life, be authentic. And I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I wanted to model what I would tell them.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, were you married young?
Yes. Yes.
How young were you when you were married?
So it's funny that you say that. I was 25 when I got married, which is, in these days, I think that's young. And my daughter is turning 24 in I can't believe it as the words, come out of my mouth, in just a couple of weeks. And I keep thinking, wow, at her age, I was already engaged.
Yeah.
Very
I asked because I was married young too. I was married at 24.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, maybe I was just about to turn 24. I can't remember. And I had 3 kids by 27. But I think what happens, I mean, I've got this hypothesis: when you get married so young and you don't really have a lot of adult life experience behind you, you miss a lot of opportunities to really come into yourself a little bit and understand who you really are. I mean, the 4 years in college, you can kind of wipe those out a little bit because, you're studying, you're partying, who knows what's going on. But, when you're out on your own living an adult life and you don't really have a lot of time to do that. And I know a lot of people in a similar boat, not the same boat, who have, all of a sudden realize that they're gay, but they realize that they haven't really been living authentic lives in other ways. Maybe it's the career choices they made that they compromised on when they were younger, or, starting a family at a certain time. I think a lot of times as adults and when we approach middle age, and I think I'm technically, because I know I'm not going to live to 100 past middle age. I think we struggle with authenticity at some point because we're not who we were at 24. And I wonder why it's so hard for us to do that. Why do we struggle and fight with authenticity so much?
Right. I think, we grow and we change. I mean, it's an evolution. I think we're supposed to. I wouldn't want to be the same person I was at 25. I like to think in all these years, I've gained some wisdom and some experience. And I think we do come into our own. I don't think we're expected to be exactly the same. But I agree with you. Even in college, I had started dating my ex-husband in college. So a lot of that experience was tied to him. And, the only path I knew was to get an education, marry a nice guy, which I did, have children, which I did. I was just following the road, maybe recreating a childhood that I didn't have, but wanted. But you're exactly right. I didn't live as an adult. I immediately got married. And so I'll reference my daughter again. I'm a little envious of her. She's living her best life. She has lived alone. She lives with flatmates. She lives in London. So she's exploring, taking advantage of geography. And I've never lived alone, ever. So I had, even at my age, I haven't had some of the experiences that my daughter has had now and is having. So she is living her best life and getting those experiences. And at the same age, I was getting ready to have a family. without actually having done exactly what you said, lived my own life as an individual and as an adult.
Yeah, I think we should take a page out of academia and give ourselves, like, every 5 years into a marriage, give ourselves a sabbatical, and
I
have
love
us
that.
be able to, like, kind of, not necessarily go out and go crazy, but really, take 4 weeks or whatever it is to kind of, be apart for a little bit and kind of see where that takes you. I don't think my wife would like that idea very much, by the way. And my listeners will probably yell at me, but it just
I think it's a fantastic idea. I support you 100%.
there we go. We'll send it up to the committee.
There you
Uh,
go. Yeah.
all right. So getting back to late bloomer, because you're spending this time in your 40s doing kind of what you were doing, when your parents divorced, which is processing through writing.
Yeah.
And at some point during the pandemic, you found all of these notes, these entries, these works.
Right.
You bring it to She Writes Press. And what's the process of putting this together as a memoir like?
So when Brooke said that she was interested in my story overall, and we started working together, we started making sense of the story itself, created a timeline, what were the major, points along my, as it was a journey. I literally likened it to as if I was driving down the highway. These were exits, these were detours, things like that. And started writing about each piece of that until it started to take shape as a story. And at some point, Brooke had said, this is really looking like a book, these pieces of it. And I said, well, what happens now? And she says, well, now you can find a publisher, because she was working with me as an editor.
Okay.
And I said, really? And she said, yeah, this looks good. I would love to have this in my catalog. And the minute she said that, I was done. I really enjoy working with Brooke. She Writes Press is a wonderful community of writers who support one another. And I was so honored that she said she wanted it in her catalog that I didn't need to go any further than that. And then we just, started shaping it more into a book with meaning, takeaways, what's the message? And as that was happening, I was also healing and creating what I thought was a universal message for women outside of sexuality, just who we are as individuals, trying to figure out who we are in this world, being authentic, what are our values, dealing with grief, loss, change, parenting.
Yeah, and how to deal with hard things, and empowering readers to know that they can do hard things.
Yes, we can reinvent ourselves as we need to.
Right. And without fear that it's going to be worse on the other side. Right. With almost like, hey, it's actually not only is it not going to be worse, it could be so much better.
Yes. And I tell people that people who reach out to me who are just at the beginning of a very similar journey, and it's very, very scary. And I tell them that this is a tough journey, but it's worth it. It's worth it when you get to the other side. And you will get there. But it is definitely worth it on the other side.
Yeah. And I have to ask, how has the reaction to the book been?
Amazing. I'm a little bit blown away, and I'm honored by the support that I've received from some really top-notch people, authors, people I know that have read the book. I've been really quite blown away and honored by the reception it's gotten.
That's great. That's great. So is there another book in you think?
Oh, I hope so. I love writing. I do. I might write about the journey of writing because, the publishing, writing a book is one thing. And what they don't tell you is getting that book into the world is a whole other journey.
It is not the fun part of it.
No.
That is for sure. That is
Right.
for sure.
Right.
So I know you're sitting in Provincetown, Massachusetts right now. Any chance you're going to do a signing at the Yellow Umbrella in Chatham this summer?
Oh, I should mark that down. I'll look into that and I'll let you know.
I have to say that it is my favorite bookstore on the
Okay.
planet. And I was able to do a book signing there, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, and 4 people showed up because it was the one sunny day during the week. And it was one of these weeks, in the Cape, the weather is, there's a big question mark. And one sunny day, nobody's in town. Everyone's going to the beach.
Right, exactly. The one day you hoped it would rain.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Well, Melissa, one of the things I like to do is get to know my guests a little bit more through pop culture. So I'm curious, when you were growing up, what were some of your favorite things to watch on TV?
I was a Trekkie. So
Were you really?
I was the original Star Trek. There you go. Right. I played it with my neighbors. We played Star Trek, but I watched it religiously. And I mean, I had the little action figures. I loved Star Trek so much that I remember watching the episode when they were all aging, dying, and Captain Kirk was getting older. He was going to die, and I turned off the television. I remember coming downstairs, and I had a bi-level house, and sitting on the stairs crying. And my mother came over to me and said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Captain Kirk, he's dying." And of course, I missed the end of that episode, and I had to wait to watch it, at some other time to realize he didn't die. But I was very invested in Star Trek.
When you would play Star Trek with the other kids, did you have a character that was your go-to character?
I did. Well, we played at Michael's house because Michael had the best backyard deck. He had a 2-tier deck. And so he always got to be Captain Kirk because it was his house. So I would either be Scotty or Bones.
Okay. But not Uhura, right? Not Uhura?
No. Maybe I should have known then. I
was going to say, maybe that could have been a sign. That
could have been another sign. I might have to redo the book for all those signs. That might have been another one. Yeah. I was always the doctor or beam me up, Scotty.
Yeah. So we would play Love Boat growing up as kids. And my friend Mario was always Captain Steubings because he had to be, like, if we played Star Wars, he was Luke. If it was Star Trek, he was Captain Kirk. He was the guy.
Right.
My twin brother looked like Dr. Bricker. So he was Dr. Bricker. I was Gopher. Not that you asked, but, Love Boat was one of my go-tos as a kid.
Well, I was thinking, and I wondered for myself, would I have been Gopher or Julie? I don't know.
Or Vicky. Or Isaac the bartender. Let's not forget Ted Lang. He was.
I did like Isaac the bartender.
He's a great character. I love. He shows up on random things every now and then. The actor Ted Lang, and it always puts a smile on my face because I picture him in the red jacket, doing the finger guns. How about music? What did you like to listen to growing up?
Oh my gosh, very eclectic. My mom, was a teenager in the 50s, and she had I still have them, all her 45s with her name on it, because back then they would bring them to parties. And my sister and I would play her 45s and sing into the beaters from, like, if you were making a cake. I wouldn't do it now, but, we used to sing to my mom's 50s, but growing up in the 70s, so I loved the 70s music. But I'm very eclectic. As I got older, I actually, you mentioned Led Zeppelin. I had Led Zeppelin posters in my college dorm. But I will listen to just about anything. Very eclectic.
I grew up listening to hard rock and heavy metal and like rap music from the early 80s. And now in my late 40s, I find myself listening to serious 70s on 7. And I don't know what happened to me because, I go from listening to like Iron Maiden to like, Gordon Lightfoot and loving every minute of, Carefree Highway.
I love it. I love it. If I go-to music for me, if I'm on the computer, I will put in 70s music. But if I'm in the car flipping stations, I will always stop if Metallica, Iron Maiden, or Judas Priest comes on. Always. And if my partner is with me, she'll look at me and go, "Really?" Right. Yes.
My wife hates that stuff when it comes on. She immediately turns it off. But I guess opposites attract.
There you go.
Do you have a favorite place to read?
To read, my favorite place to do almost anything is here in Provincetown. This is my go-to, my happy place to read here, to write here. But if I'm back in New Jersey, I have a house in New Jersey that my son still has one more year of college, and that's their home. But I'll just curl up on the couch or in bed, and I have one favorite chair in my bedroom that I will curl up into a blanket and read. But if I'm here in Provincetown, anywhere. I have a little patio outside. I will sit and curl up there and read.
How about a favorite place to write?
Provincetown, for sure. I absolutely love writing here. Just being here is very inspirational. And you feel the presence of so many people that have been here before. All the artists that come here, writers, artists, photographers, anybody. And you just feel that here. So this is my favorite place to write. And while I didn't take a sabbatical from my marriage when I was married, I took a sabbatical here for 6 weeks, a couple of times to write and just to stay in the flow. It's very easy to do that here.
Yeah. How long have you been in Provincetown for?
We've owned this little place. It's a little bit of a fishbowl, but it's ours for 5 years. And, go back and forth between here and New Jersey.
All right. Now, do you stay up there all year round or do you vacate in the off season?
Well, we use it all year round, but, we do have to stay in New Jersey. Family reasons, maintain the house. My mom is in New Jersey. So we go back and forth. I've been here now. I've dropped anchor here. So I'm here most of the summer now. And
Nice.
we'll see what happens afterwards. But my favorite place to be is here. Yes.
Very nice. And my last question for you is always the deep one, which is I call it the dear younger me question. So if you could write a letter, because I know you're a writer, or write a letter, maybe it's to the 11, 12-year-old Melissa who is writing herself some letters about her parents' divorce. But if you can give that younger self some words of advice or encouragement, what would you tell the younger Melissa?
Keep reading. I don't think I read enough when I was that age, when I was younger. And I feel like I'm making up for lost time now. There's just so many amazing things to read out there in the world. And I have piles and piles and piles of books waiting for me to dig into that I like to think, had somebody given me this advice when I was a kid, I would have read then and gone back a second and third time. So I would tell that younger me, keep reading, keep writing, and just keep going. It gets better.
Yeah, maybe keep your eyes open in the locker room. Well, Melissa, where can people pick up Late Bloomer?
You can get Late Bloomer. It's available for pre-order now anywhere. We love supporting our independent bookstores, but you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere that books are sold. You'd be able to pre-order it.
And I'm sure there's a couple of nice bookstores up in Provincetown.
Oh my gosh, yes. Women Craft is just an iconic bookstore here. But I think there's 3 altogether that are here. There's Women Craft, East End, and Provincetown Bookstore. And we support all of them because we love our independent bookstores.
Yes, we do. We do. Especially after the pandemic with the rise of Amazon, we can put a little wind in the sails of our local independent bookstores.
Absolutely.
Melissa, where can people find more information about you? Do you have a website or any social media handles you want to share?
I do have a website. They can find me at melissagiberson.com. I am on Facebook, Melissa Giberson. I'm on Instagram, Melissa Giberson 031. And I love hearing from people. So shoot me a message through the website or on Facebook.
All right. I will be sure to put all of that in our show notes so people can just look it up really easily and reach out to you. Melissa, thank you so much for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you so much. I loved having this chat with you, Mike. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.